This video is sponsored by Car Vertical. Don't forget to use my promo code HIGHPEAK for 20% off each and every check that you do. Hello and welcome back to more High Peak. Well, the subject for today's video is quite an interesting one. It's the Land Rover Discovery. Now, many of you might not know this, but the Land Rover Discovery has been around since, well, it's been around for as long as I have. It's hard to believe, but the Land Rover Discovery has been around since 1989, and it was made to close the gap between the luxurious Range Rover and the workhorse Defender. The people at Land Rover at the time wanted to create a car that was as capable as the Defender, but not quite as luxurious as the Range Rover. They wanted something that you could use on the farm, but then still go out to dinner in. That was the whole point of the Discovery. The Land Rover Discovery is a car that I know an awful lot about. I've just grown up with them. My dad started off with a 1992 200 series, then he replaced it with a 1995 300 series, then he got a TD5, then we've had Discovery 3s, 4s, and then the latest shape. So today's video is something of a buyer's guide. We're going to talk about the pros and the cons of each model, starting with the Discovery 2. The only one not included on this list is the first model, and that's because I haven't filmed with a Discovery, well, I guess a Discovery 1 you'd call it. That's basically because they're just a bit too old and most of them are just rusted away. Okay, then let's kick things off with the Discovery 2. Now, this model came out in 1998 and ran until 2004. When these cars were new, prices started at £25,000 all the way up to £35,000 for a high-spec V8. But thanks to depreciation, you can now pick them up for, well, a tenth of that. Sadly, I'm old enough to remember when these cars first came out, and they were a real game changer. They were bigger than the previous model, and for the first time, the 6th and 7th seat were forward-facing. They weren't those jump seats. However, in typical Land Rover fashion, they weren't without their issues. Let's find out more, shall we? Alright guys, how's it going? Welcome back. Today I'm in this 2001 Land Rover Discovery 2 with a 4-litre V8 petrol engine. As many of you know, I'm a big Land Rover fan. In fact, I think some of you think I must have Stockholm Syndrome, but I just won't hear a bad word said against them. I like the Discovery 3, 4 and 5. I think the Discovery Sport's very good. I thought the Land Rover Freelander 2 was very good. And I just love all Range Rovers. Naturally then, you'll expect me to spend the next 10 minutes singing this Discovery 2's praises. Well, I won't be doing. I just don't think they're good cars. In fact, when people bash Land Rovers for being thirsty, unreliable, and just generally wasteful, I think it's the Discovery 2 that they're referring to. This puts me in a tricky position because whenever I criticise a car, all of the die-hard fans come out of the woodwork and get very personal, and then have to start blocking people. It happened quite recently when I said that the MG3 was just a cheap Chinese attempt to cash in on the MG badge, which is true, by the way. Instead, what I'm going to try to do with this Discovery 2 is put a positive spin on it. Instead of sitting here for the next 10 or 12 minutes and hear me moaning and rambling about how bad things are, I'm going to try and be a bit more upbeat. Let's see how it goes. Firstly, when you try and start the car, Land Rover have thought of a very clever anti-theft device. You see, they've placed the ignition barrel just too close to the rest of the dash, so nobody with big hands can actually start the Discovery. This means that at 3 in the morning, when there's a burglar trying to steal the Discovery, he won't be able to do it. Now that is very clever, Land Rover. Very clever indeed. When you've practiced enough times and perfected the hand movement, and you eventually learn to start the car, then the lovely sounding 4-litre V8 will fire into life. And it does sound beautiful, to be fair. Something that's very clever about this engine is once it reaches about 10 years old, it starts to produce its own mayonnaise, which if you've got an entrepreneurial streak, you'll be able to cash in on. Every time you open the oil filler cap, there'll be more white gold for you to harvest. This thing is literally a gold mine. Don't think that the mobile Hellman's maker is unique to the petrol engine either, because I've had a few TD5s over the years with the same issue. Whether you buy the turbo diesel or the V8 model, you'll become very familiar with your local petrol station. Just think of all those nectar points you'll be able to earn. Every couple of months you'll be entitled to a new toaster or kettle or even a 32-inch LCD TV. The benefits really are endless. The TD5 will average about 20 miles per gallon, and this petrol V8 will do about 15. You might think that because there's a glorious sounding 4-litre V8 petrol engine under the bonnet, that this thing is something of a licence loser. Well, Land Rover have your back once again. They've only managed to extract 184 horsepower from it, so your licence is safe as houses. The other good thing is if you drive it very carefully and you gently feather the accelerator, occasionally you'll manage to get 17 or even 18 miles per gallon from it. If you go for the 5-speed manual model, the clutch is so heavy it will constantly tone your calf muscles, which you'll be grateful of in later life. The other good thing is when the clutch needs replacing, it'll set you back about £1,000, which means £200 of that £1,000 will go straight to the government in VAT. So they can do things like, house the homeless and fix potholes. So that's good, isn't it? The other £800, of course, will go to your local mechanic, so he can take his children on holiday. It really is a win-win. If you went for the automatic model like this, it will always entertain you because you just never know what gear to expect. Luckily it's a 4-speed automatic, so there aren't that many ratios to choose from. Excuse the sweat here, the air conditioning is not working, which again is a good thing because it's cleaning my pores. If you went for the diesel automatic, that one is so ponderously slow, it gives you plenty of time to relax and centre yourself. It's very zen. Let's do the old bypass test. So I'm doing 30 miles an hour, foot to the floor, kick down into, I guess, second. 50 miles an hour. I'm in top gear. 55 miles an hour. 60, way! I think we'll stick at 60. This generation of Discovery ran from 1998 until 2004, and it's very popular with outdoorsy people. You know, people who like to go kayaking or camping. And Land Rover know this, and they've designed this car specifically with that audience in mind. You see, when it reaches 10 or 12 years old, the glue that holds the headlining up will disintegrate, so the headlining will start to sag, which makes it feel like you're in a tent. Also, when it rains, the sunroofs will leak, which will force cold air down the back of your neck, which again, just reminds you of the great outdoors, doesn't it? It's that sort of attention to detail you just don't get with other manufacturers. Next up, this being a large 4x4, you'd think it would be the ideal car to haul your family around in, wouldn't you? The trouble is, nowadays, with obesity on the rise, you don't want your loved ones getting chubbier and more diabetic, do you? Well, Land Rover have thought of this. In the middle row, there's not much room at all. There's also not much room to get in or out, which means by the time your loved ones have shoehorned their way in, they'll think twice about having that second portion of dinner, won't they? Reducing the risks of diabetes and obesity. Now in the back, there are 2 more seats. When I was a kid, my dad had a K-Reg 200 series, and then he replaced that with an M-Reg 300 series. And they had those fold-down jump seats, which as a kid I thought were great fun. But with this Series 2 Discovery, they were given the axe in favour of these forward-facing seats, which I don't know for sure, but I imagine this was some sort of EU regulation to make sure that your kids were safe. Those interfering idiots in Brussels. Anyway, these 2 seats in the back will force your children to become more intelligent and to think outside the box, because they don't fold up or down in a very logical way. Folding these seats down with kids crying in the background really could be a new game on the Crystal Maze. It helps if you have a PhD in engineering and you're an origami enthusiast. Speaking of lateral thinking, the central locking in this car will also keep you on your toes. Sometimes the rear locks just don't unlock at all, which again, I think this is Land Rover being ultra safe and secure. They wanted to prevent carjackings, obviously. Nowadays, start-stop systems are commonplace, aren't they? I bet you didn't know it was Land Rover who invented it first. Well, watch this. You sat here, the engine's idling. You press the central locking button. The engine dies. No more pollution, no more CO2. The Green Party will love it. Before we continue with the review, I just need to say a big thank you to today's video sponsor, Car Vertical. Now, before you hand over any cash for a used car or motorbike, it's really important that you do a thorough vehicle history check. Otherwise, you just don't know what you're buying. A car might look okay on the face of it, but until you do a thorough vehicle history check, you really don't know what's lurking beneath. I've been using Car Vertical now for years, and every single car you can see on the forecourt, I've checked using Car Vertical. All you do is head over to carvertical.com and type in the reg or the VIN, and then it produces a very detailed report. So it tells you whether it's ever been stolen, written off, had a mileage rollback, or has outstanding finance on it. In addition to that, it shows you the MOT history, the ownership changes, the spec of the car, the average market value, and a whole lot more. It doesn't just work in the UK either, it works in 35 different countries. So before you complete your purchase of your car or motorcycle, make sure you do a thorough vehicle history check first using Car Vertical. If you use my promo code HIGHPEAK, that's HIGHPEAK all one word, HIGHPEAK, you'll save yourself 20% off each and every check that you do. Or alternatively, click the link below in the video description. Right, enough of that. Let's try and start it again. There we go. They also have a self-levelling air suspension system on the rear, which can occasionally fail. That just makes getting into the back far more easier. There should be an actual step on it as well, but that fell off because it was a bit rusty. But we won't talk about that. The other good thing is that hydraulic step frequently fails, which is why you'll see so many Discovery 2s with the step hanging down on the floor. Now, this again is very good for parking because it makes it a rudimentary parking sensor of sorts, because when you back up to something, that will touch the curb first. You know, so you don't damage any of the tail lights. What else can I tell you about it? You know what, I give up. I can't pretend that this is a good car. I don't mean this particular one, I mean the Discovery 2 in general. I don't think it'll become collectible like a Range Rover Classic or a Defender will. It's not nice to drive, it's not nice to look at, the steering's all over the place, the brakes shouldn't be relied on. It's big, heavy, clumsy and cumbersome. It's not very reliable, and they rust too. It crashes, as I'm sure you've heard throughout this video, it crashes all over the place. And the body roll is something else. It should come with a warning. Warning, going around corners may cause sickness. The driving position is ridiculously high. It feels as though you're on stilts. It just feels like a dinosaur. It sits on the road like an 8-track in a sea of iPods. I've had countless of these cars in my time and they've always bit me on the bum. Always. I had a 2002 model once which had faulty rear air suspension shock, so I had that fixed. And the guy that I sold it to traded in an S-Reg version of this car, which was as rotten as a pear. And he had the cheek to accuse me of doing a dodgy MOT on it, because he said it was rusty. Well, it's a 15-year-old Discovery or whatever it was at the time. What do you expect? I don't even do my own MOTs, so how could I have passed a dodgy one? Anyway, he had the people from Vosa come round to inspect the MOT station that I used, to make sure that it was alright, which it was in the end. I took another one once in part exchange, and the guy that traded it in was about 5 feet tall, so the seat was stuck very close to the dash, and not only had the cable adjuster snapped, but also the electronic controls weren't working. So I jumped in it to drive, smashed my knees on the dash, the windows were all faulty so it wouldn't work, the air conditioning didn't work, and as I tried to get out of the car, the door latch broke. So there I was, trapped in this sweaty old Discovery. In the end I had to climb out through the back door. I took another one in part exchange once from a regular customer, and he told me that it was parked outside his mechanics because they couldn't fix it. So I went along to his mechanics in a neighbouring village with my booster pack, got it going, and because it had been sat there for 6 months, all the interior was mouldy and disgusting. So I drove it then about 30 minutes or 35 minutes down to my mechanics. But for some reason, every single time I tried to adjust the steering wheel, the horn sounded. You can picture the scene, can't you? There I was trying to discreetly move this barely legal Discovery down to my mechanics, and every single small correction of the steering wheel, honk, honk, like that. Can you imagine? 30 minutes of that. In the end, I was so glad that it overheated, I had to turn it off. They are very good off-road, these cars, but then so are lots of other cars. So's the Land Cruiser, so's the Shogun, so's the Suzuki Jimny. Just buy one of those instead. I'm probably being a bit harsh on the Discovery because this particular car is now 20 years old. When they first came to the UK scene back in 1990, they were ahead of the time, and they were very popular. But by 2001, you had things like the BMW X5 on the road, the Mercedes ML, the new shape Range Rover, and these just all felt prehistoric in comparison. This car, believe it or not, still uses the underpinnings of the 1970 Range Rover. It just feels woefully outdated. Park this next to a 1998 ML320, and this looks like something you'd see on a caveman's wall. So that was the Discovery 2. I know that was a tongue-in-cheek review, but I was just trying to warn you. You've got to find a good one. If you find a good one, then they're still very capable, but there are an awful lot of bad examples out there. Thankfully though, things changed with the Discovery 3. This was worlds apart from the previous model. The Discovery 3 came out in 2004 and ran until 2009, and it came with different engines, gearboxes, and a way more luxurious interior. It was also much more capable off-road and far nicer on it. If you're in the market for a Discovery 3 today, you can pick these up from as little as £1,000, but be warned, I wouldn't, to be honest. You want to spend maybe £5,000 to get yourself a nice one. What I'd actually advise is try and find one from late 2008, early 2009, because they were just a bit better. They'd fix some of the common issues that plagued the early examples. Alright guys, how's it going? So today I'm in a Land Rover Discovery 3 to try and figure out whether or not you should buy one. The model I'm in today is a late 2006 with a 2.7 litre TDV6, and it's the HSE spec, which is the best spec you can get. So I've got lots of nice extras like sat-nav, heated leather seats, I've got 3 sunroofs, but is it any good? So let's take it for a drive and see what it's like. the Discovery's been around since the early 90s with the 200 series, then later the 300 series, and then after that it was the Discovery 2. You could even buy a two-door version of the early Discovery. So I think Land Rover were trying to appeal to farmers really, who wanted a utility vehicle but wanted something a bit nicer than a Defender, or a bit more luxurious than a Defender. In 2004 Land Rover released the Discovery 3, and it was a huge step forward because it's so much better than the previous model. It looks much better, much more modern and cleaner, much more appealing. The interior is much nicer, and the drive it's worlds apart from the previous model. I think the only people that still run the old shape Discovery now are people that do a lot of off-roading, because I can't imagine why you'd still use one on a daily basis when you could buy a Discovery 3. You've got a choice of two different engines. You can have the 2.7 litre turbo diesel like the one I've got today, or you could buy a 4.4 litre V8 petrol with 300 horsepower. Back in 2010 I had a 2005 Discovery 3 4.4 litre V8 HSE spec, and to this day it remains one of the best cars I've ever owned. It was green with a beige interior, so proper Land Rover colours, and yeah, I just love that thing. But obviously the downside was the fuel, because it would average about 16 miles per gallon, but it did sound very good. So yeah, the 4.4 litre V8 is another option if you want more power or more speed, but it will cost you at the filling station. This 2.7 TD V6 is much more sensible to run. I mean, today while I'm driving around town, I've been averaging 24.1 miles per gallon, which for such a big, heavy, boxy car is very impressive. If you get it on the motorway, you'll probably do 32, 33 miles per gallon. So yeah, it's not that expensive to run. Although the road tax in the UK is £550 a year, or £555 I think it's gone up to. Unless you can get a pre-2006 model, in which case it's only 320. The trouble with the TDV6 is that it only produces 190 horsepower, so you can't really rush this thing. It just goes at its own pace. And to be fair, I'm sat now on a dual carriageway doing the speed limit, so it's not dangerously slow or anything, but you won't be winning any drag races in it. Not unless you're racing a Prius. In terms of what it's like to drive, it's a big heavy bus with a turbo diesel engine and an automatic gearbox. So you shouldn't get any points on your licence for speeding. This one has a 6-speed automatic gearbox, which does dull down the performance a little bit. I've had lots of manual Discovery 3s too, and I quite like the manual Discovery. It sort of suits the car better. You sort of feel like you're in a tough off-roader in a manual. The steering's nice and light, making it really easy to drive around town. And the fact it's got air suspension just makes it really smooth and comfortable. Just completely irons out any bumps in the road. A bit like a Range Rover. There is a bit of body roll though. The fact it's a big heavy four-wheel drive, but you're always going to get that. Unless you go for a sportier, you know, Q7 or something like that. They're very practical too. I've got 7 seats. You get a split folding tailgate. And even with the 7 seats in place, you still get a bit of a boot. On the middle row of seats, you get plenty of space. There's loads of headroom where the roof steps up. Inside is light and airy because I've got the 3 sunroofs and the tall windows, so you get lots of light and it feels quite roomy and quite spacious. It's not a quick car, but once you get it going, it does glide along quite nicely. I love the styling of it too. It looks rugged and tough, but it also looks modern. It looks just as good, this thing, driving through the city as it does driving through the desert. It just looks at home everywhere, and I like it in silver too. I think it looks clean and sharp. Because they've been around for nearly 15 years, which I struggle to get my head around because in my mind they're still a modern looking car. But anyway, because they've been around for 15 years, you can pick them up for next to nothing. If you have a quick look on Auto Trader or eBay, you'll get one for about £3,000. But that will be an early, high mileage, low spec example, which I would avoid, to be honest. So, like anything of this nature, prices do vary massively. But yeah, if you've got a budget of about 10 grand, you will get yourself a nice one. But I suppose it all depends what you want. I would want an HSE with a load of extras, but some people might not be bothered about that. If you just want a workhorse, you might better get an S or an SE or a GS or something. This particular one is late 2006 and it's done 88,000 miles with excellent service history, in excellent condition. So it's worth somewhere between 9 and 10 grand. Now I'd better talk to you about the important stuff. which is the reliability. Because that's where I'm going to get the majority of my comments, I know, from people telling me how unreliable they are. But again, as I've said with countless Range Rover videos that I've done, that's just not been my experience of these cars at all. So I'll just rattle off some of the common issues. These aren't issues that I've experienced myself, but they're issues that I've heard of. So on the diesel model, you could have to replace the EGR valve. That's a fairly common problem, but again, one that I've never had to sort out. And because the EGR valve is buried deep under the bonnet, that'll cost you about £1,000 to sort out. And it probably will go at some point in the car's life. So that's one thing to keep in mind. Another thing is the car's electronic handbrake. At some point in its life, it will fail, and that costs about £1,000. Then you've got the air suspension, and the compressor can fail, which again will cost not £1,000, in case you're wondering. You can either get them refurbed or just have a look on the internet, because you can pick them up for about 300 quid. That's not an expensive job to fix, and it's only about an hour's labour to replace that, so that's not a big deal. You've got the airbags, which can leak, and then that's why sometimes you see Range Rovers and Discoveries and stuff completely on the backside or listing to one side like the Tower of Pisa. But again, you would just replace those bags. They're not that expensive. But again, these are all common issues that everybody tells me about. But, touch wood, and I can't because this doesn't have any, touch wood, I've never had to replace. So, they're just things to be wary of, really. One thing you can do to prevent the handbrake from failing is you can get it serviced. So, the mechanics will strip it all down, grease it all up, and that way it stops it getting dry and stops it sticking on. Because a lot of people in automatics don't even use that handbrake, and that's even worse for it, because then it just seizes up, and like I say, you're into £1,000 to fix it. Another common issue is bearing failure in the engine. Now that can happen if you don't change your oil and filter for a prolonged period of time. So the best thing to do to prevent that happening is make sure you service it every 8 or 10,000 miles most. Another issue is crankshaft failure, but this can be prevented by having your automatic gearbox serviced, but not just serviced, but having it flushed every 80,000 miles. That way that won't happen. And the automatic gearbox service is something that I do on most cars that have done 80 or 100,000 miles, because even though the manufacturers will tell you that it's a sealed for life unit, that's a load of rubbish. All that means is it's just sealed until it's out of their warranty, and then it's not their concern anymore. And for the sake of a couple £100, it's just done, and you've got peace of mind then for another 80,000 miles. So that all sounds worrying, doesn't it? But don't let that put you off buying one, because I must have owned, I don't know, a dozen, maybe 15 Discovery 3s, and I've never had a single issue like that. But you better be aware of them anyway, because then at least you can try and prevent them happening. But just be careful with what you're buying. Make sure it's had regular oil services. Make sure it's got full service history. Another thing to mention with the diesels, they have a timing belt, so make sure you replace that. I think they're due at about 100,000 miles, but again, I wouldn't want to leave it that long. That's something I'm quite paranoid about as well. Whenever I buy a car, that's the first thing I check, and I just get it done, because again, for the sake of 300 quid or whatever it's going to cost, if that snaps, then the engine's just wrecked. I mean, you could be one of those unlucky people who has something like this for 3 years, and every single one of those problems that I mentioned could happen to you. But that is really unlikely. So just do your homework, make sure you buy a straight, clean car with good history, and you should be fine. And just make sure you look after it, because at the risk of sounding like a broken record, all used cars are the same, so if you just look after them, they will look after you. So overall, they're not a bad car to own. I just wanted to give you a warts and all assessment of everything I know about Discovery 3s. But one crucial thing to mention is, if you're looking for this kind of vehicle, there's hardly any competition. Lots of people who buy these buy them because they need it to do a certain job rather than actually wanting one. So they buy them because they've got a horse box that they need to tow, or a big caravan, or they've got 5 children. When you think about the Discovery 3's rivals for the same sort of money, there aren't many other choices. You could have a Nissan Pathfinder, because that's 7 seats, but I'd rather have a Discovery. You could have a Jeep Commander, but you've got to ask yourself some serious questions. You could have a Shogun, but they rot famously unless you find a nice one. Hyundai Terracan perhaps? Absolutely not. No. So basically, the pick of the bunch is the Discovery 3. So that was the Discovery 3, and I think you'll agree that was a much more positive review. It's quite easy to heap praise on the Discovery 3, that's just because it's so capable and so versatile. And, crucially, it was way better than the Discovery 2. So we've talked about the Discovery 2 and the Discovery 3, so it probably won't surprise you to hear that the next car is, you guessed it right, the Discovery 4. Now the Discovery 4 is probably my favourite. I think it's the pick of the bunch. I honestly think this is peak Land Rover Discovery. They just got it right. The Land Rover Discovery 4 came out in late 2009 and ran until 2016. And again, they'd taken the Discovery 3 and just improved it. The engines were better, the gearboxes were better, and the styling was a bit sharper. When they were new, prices started at £30,000 all the way to £50,000. But now they're 15, 16 years old, you can pick them up from as little as 4 or 5. The thing I like about the Discovery 4 is that it still has that go-anywhere feel, but with a more luxurious edge. In fact, some would argue that it went too far. In top-spec HSE trim, it was quite close to a Range Rover. And on top of that, I love the styling of the Discovery 4. It's still got that boxy, traditional look. Okay, anyway, enough talking, let's get into it. Alright guys, how's it going? Welcome back. Today I'm in this Land Rover Discovery 4, and we're going to try and figure out whether it's worth buying. As much as I'm a fan of the Land Rover brand, don't expect this to be some sort of Land Rover loving, because it won't be. This is going to be a warts and all video. The Land Rover Discovery has been around since 1989, so it's been on this planet as long as I have, actually. And it's cleverly carved itself out a niche, sitting somewhere between the rough and ready Defender and the very luxurious Range Rover. There have been lots of different Discovery models over the years, some good and some not so good. But the Discovery 4 in particular ran from late 2009 until 2016. In my mind, this is the best looking Discovery ever made. It's more modern than the Discovery 3, which it replaced, but it's nowhere near as rich, yuppie, mom on the school run Chelsea tractor as the Disco 5. Straight away I can tell you there are lots of positives with this car, such as the fact that it's extremely capable off-road. The high driving position is superb. The interior is very luxurious, and its silhouette is instantly recognisable. However, it's not all good, there are some negatives, which I'll get onto shortly. Styling wise, I think it's great. It's a great continuation of the Discovery 3. Think more evolution, not revolution. This looks better, tighter, neater, cleaner. For example, I like the fact that you get body coloured wheel arches, rather than the black plastic ones like on the previous model. I like the fact that you get a very usable split folding tailgate, which can be used as a bench. I like the fact that it's instantly recognisable. I also like the fact that it's got a softer, more approachable countryside image, rather than a yuppie one. I love how boxy and square it is. It just looks cool compared to all those soft grey SUVs that blight our roads these days. I particularly like the facelift model from 2014. That got new lights and new badges on the bonnet. It's also a car that's decidedly old money. It's the sort of car you'd expect to see trundling around a big sprawling country estate. To give you some kind of idea of people's perceptions of it and how it makes you feel, I'd rather drive this than a Range Rover Sport of a similar age. This is less try-hard, you feel like less of a show-off. Moving inside, if you go for a top-spec HSE model like this one, which I implore you to do by the way, you could be very easily fooled into thinking that you're in a Range Rover, because it's every bit as luxurious. And yet this feels more usable, more functional, more of a workhorse. Whilst this has everything that you'd associate with a luxury SUV. In fact, sorry, I shouldn't call it an SUV. This feels like a proper old-fashioned 4x4. These soft leather seats are particularly comfortable. You could do a lot of miles in this. The layout of everything just feels right. In fact, from the minute you get behind the wheel of this, you just feel right at home. There's plenty of storage, plenty of space, 2 cup holders. You get nice big chunky buttons which are easy to operate, even if you're a farmer with chubby sausage fingers, or if it's winter and you're wearing gloves. There are also heated seats, a heated windscreen, a heated steering wheel's an option, air conditioning, cruise control, digital radio, everything you could possibly want from a modern car, this has. In fact, that's not quite true. This doesn't have Bluetooth media streaming, so you can't play music via Bluetooth. You need to plug it in using the old-fashioned cable. When did they even still make those? Bluetooth streaming became available from late 2012. The infotainment system does look a little bit dated sat here in 2022, but it still does the job. And the Harman Kardon stereo sounds fantastic. As you'd expect from a Land Rover, it's extremely practical, and it's available with 7 seats. And even with all 7 seats up, there's still some boot, albeit the boot from a Mini Cooper. With the 5 rear seats folded flat, you get a whopping 2,500 litres of cargo space. Speaking of the seats, they can be quite fiddly to fold up and down. I'm sure if I read through the owner's manual it'd tell me in an instant, but I'm a man, so I simply refuse to do it. That would be an admission of failure, wouldn't it? There's plenty of room in the back, plenty of leg room, plenty of headroom thanks to its stepped roof. You have these big low windows which not only give you great visibility, they also let lots of light in, which makes this a nice bright car to be in, even with a dark leather interior. There's also plenty of room up front, even if you're built like a basketball player. You get not one but two glove boxes, which does creak and sound a little bit cheap, but it's not a deal breaker. Here in the UK, where everybody whinges about the cost of fuel, there's only a 3-litre turbo diesel engine available. In other parts of the world, you could have bought a 3-litre petrol or a 5-litre 385 horsepower V8. Anyway, here in the UK, there are two variants of this twin turbo diesel V6. There's the TDV6 or the slightly more powerful SDV6, like the one in this model. This one produces 245 horsepower. And to be fair, it does a reasonable job. It feels quite smooth, it's quite quiet. It doesn't feel anywhere near as sluggish as the old 2.7 TDV6, which only had one turbo, which was found in the previous generation. I'm currently sat at 30 miles an hour, and if I plant my foot, there's a bit of power there. It's quite adequate for a car like this, to be fair. I can't imagine what the 5-litre V8 feels like. I imagine I'd be quite impressed with that. But here it just wouldn't wash, would it? Oh no, I like me diesels, mate. A 5-litre V8, you can pass everything apart from a bloody petrol station. When in actual fact, in the real world, there's probably only a difference of 3 or 4 miles per gallon. And they'll forget that petrol's cheaper than diesel. And they'll forget that with the diesel you might have issues with the injectors, the EGR, the DPF, the crank bearings. But for some reason they've got it in their heads that petrol's expensive to run and diesel isn't. The previous model, the Discovery 3, was available with a 4.4 litre V8 petrol. And that produced about 300 horsepower. And I actually had one of those cars myself, which I ran for a bit. And that was a glorious engine. Granted, it wasn't great on fuel, but it was smooth, reliable, quick. Anyway, that engine was discontinued back in 2007 because of poor sales. Well, I'm sat here at 70 miles an hour, and it is quite a windy day, so there is a bit of wind noise. You're always going to get some wind noise in a car like this with its upright windscreen, and its slab sides, and its big boxy door mirrors. Initially, the Discovery 4 was offered with a 6-speed ZF automatic gearbox. In late 2011, that was replaced with a later 8-speed ZF box, which is much better. And that 8-speed does get better fuel economy, especially on a run when it can plonk itself in top gear and just keep itself to minimal revs. The easy way to work out whether your car's got the 6-speed box or the 8-speed box is the gear selector itself. The 6-speeds have this traditional gear lever, whereas the 8-speed it was replaced with a rotary dial. As I mentioned earlier, in 2014 the Discovery 4 was facelifted. Now that model crucially came with start-stop, and by fitting it with start-stop they managed to reduce the emissions, which meant that the road tax was slightly lower. Because this model sits in what's now the highest bracket, which costs a whopping £615 a year. In terms of what it's like to drive, straight away I like it. It's hard not to like this commanding driving position. And everything just feels sharper than the Discovery 3. It's still a little bit wallowy and a little bit wayward on the steering, but you're going to get that on an old-fashioned 4x4. The actual steering wheel itself's nice to touch. Feels like it's been made from quality products. The whole thing just feels much more modern. And I think out here in the countryside, it looks right at home. In this, the 3-litre SDV6, 0 to 60 takes just over 10 seconds, which is a little bit misleading because it actually feels a bit more brisk than that. Anyway, a single-digit 0 to 60 time isn't really important on a car like this, is it? It still feels a little bit like a pendulum as you go into corners, so it's by no means a BMW X5, but it's not bad. Not bad at all. Thanks to its front and rear parking sensors, parking this big tank up is not a problem at all. Sat behind the wheel, you can see all 4 corners very easily, making this an easy car to place. Thinking about it, this could make a good rural family car. It feels like it could withstand some abuse. And it'd obviously cope really well in extreme weather. You just wouldn't feel guilty driving this along some narrow country lanes past some bramble bushes, like you would in a Range Rover. There are lots of different specs to go for. Now, because I'm spoiled, I'd recommend you go for a high-spec model, such as an HSE or an XS. Anything less than that just misses the point. If you really want to torture yourself, buy an old Defender. I mean, even if you intend to use this for work, it's nice to have some luxuries, isn't it? Like a heated screen and heated seats. There's one coming towards me now. They're a good-looking car, you know. I don't like his choice of chrome wing mirror covers, personally, but they're the sorts of things you order on eBay when you're bored at night after a couple too many glasses of wine. They do not look good. Chrome on cars belongs in the 1950s. Leave it alone. Does not look good. Anyway, speaking of using the Discovery 4 for work, there's even a commercial model available. which basically deletes the rear seats, making this a very luxurious van. I've had a few of those pass through my hands over the years, and they're very practical. They're perfect if you're a rural vet, or some other sort of horsey, muddy line of work. Because the commercials are stronger and heavier, which is surprising given the fact that they've only got 2 seats, not 7, they need a Class 7 MOT, which most garages don't offer. It's something worth bearing in mind if you're after one. Well, so far then, everything's good, isn't it? Well, not so fast. There are some negatives. Because this is a farmer-friendly, rugged workhorse, please don't be fooled into thinking that you'll have cheap running costs, because you really won't. Yes, it might have a diesel engine under the bonnet, but it isn't what you'd call frugal. In terms of miles per gallon, you'll only do early 20s around town and perhaps mid-30s on a steady run. Road tax here in the UK sits in the highest bracket of £615 a year. That's unless you go for a later model with fewer emissions. Or, of course, you go for a commercial model, which is cheaper still. The parts are very expensive if you go down the genuine route, and please don't forget, they're very complex vehicles. There's just more to go wrong than an old Corolla, so if you're really worried about running costs, then don't buy one. Buy something simple. The tyres are quite expensive, they'll set you back about £180 a corner. And because they're a heavy car, they go through things like anti-roll bars and track rod ends and bushings and all that sort of stuff quicker than a smaller, lighter car would. It also has air suspension, which makes the ride nice and smooth when it's working, but when it isn't working, it can be quite expensive to repair. Instead of suspension coils on each corner, it has an air bag which pumps up. If the bags fail, you're looking at about £250 per bag. If the compressor which pumps up the bags fails, you're looking at about £300 to £400 for that. If the airlines perish and fail which carries the air from the compressor to the individual bags, expect to spend around £1,000 to sort that out. Been there, got the t-shirt, I'm afraid. It has an electronic handbrake, which in my mind is a big mistake. They always seem to fail, and it'll set you back around £800 when it does. The EGR valves can clog, and that'll set you back around £1,000. The diesel has a timing belt which needs to be replaced every 8 years or 105,000 miles. That'll set you back between £400 and £500. This all sounds negative, but I suppose my point is really, don't buy one of these on a shoestring. If you can't afford to run one, then don't buy one. Just because it's more rugged and more of a workhorse than a Range Rover, don't expect it to be cheaper to run than a Range Rover. I mean, you could always buy something else. If you're planning to use your Disco 4 on the school run, then there are loads of other options which are cheaper. But there aren't so many options if you're planning to use this car as Land Rover intended. Reliability is where Land Rover always seems to get a bad name, and I think a lot of it's unjust. For example, this particular model's done 140,000 miles. The Discovery 3 that I filmed with last weekend has done 223,000 miles. The last commercial Discovery I had done 155,000 miles, and all of them ran like a Swiss watch. So, my question is, I guess, how many miles do you expect to get out of a car? Yes, they can be costly to fix, but all of those issues that I mentioned previously, the electronic handbrake, the air suspension, EGR valves, you can and will have that issue with a Audi Q7, a BMW X5, a Mercedes GL. None of those are cheaper to run or repair, and yet they don't get the same sort of stick that Land Rovers do. Used prices here in the UK start at around £7,000, but all that's going to get you is a very low spec, very high mileage example, which I guarantee will cost you a couple of grand in repairs within the first 12 months. So you're far better spending £10,000, £11,000, £12,000 and getting yourself a half decent one. A nice 2015 facelift with sensible miles will set you back around £20,000 or £22,000. So prices are all over the place. It just means there's something out there for all budgets. If you're looking to buy one, first and foremost, whatever your budget is, keep a couple of grand back for any repairs or any scheduled maintenance that hasn't been done. Make sure it's got good service records. Make sure the timing belt's been done. I'd service the gearbox if it hasn't been done already. I'd run it on premium fuel. I'd ask the seller if they've replaced the handbrake or had any air suspension issues, because chances are they will have done, and it'd be good to know a bit more history about it. And the rest, I suppose, is down to maintenance, how you drive it and treat it, and a bit of good old-fashioned luck.
Okay, that was the Discovery 4, the penultimate Discovery in our list. On to the last one, the Discovery 5. Now, I call it the Discovery 5. It wasn't officially known as the Discovery 5. I don't really know why. They just simply called it the Discovery. And this one's a bit divisive. It certainly divided opinion, and I can see why. There were a couple of reasons it divided opinion. Firstly, the styling. A lot of people didn't like the fact that it had lost its boxy, rugged edge. In fact, a lot of people said that it looked more like a Chelsea tractor than a true off-roader. And also, a lot of people were very upset about the offset rear plate. And I don't really know why. I think it works. The other reason the Discovery 5 was quite controversial was because people felt that it kind of lost its purpose. You see, the Discovery 5 is so luxurious, it's almost become a school-run wagon as opposed to a true off-roader. I think a lot of people felt that it had simply gone too upmarket. I mean, the one feature in this next video had things like deployable side steps and heated leather steering wheel. And as nice as features like that are, it's kind of veered too far away from its original purpose. And that, of course, has created a gap in the market for things like the Ineos Grenadier. Anyway, let's have a look at it and see what it's like. Alright guys, how's it going? Welcome back. Today I'm in this 2019 Land Rover Discovery. This 5th generation Discovery has been around since 2017. I keep wrongly referring to it as the Disco 5. You just assume, wouldn't you, after the Discovery 2, 3 and 4, Land Rover would have called it the 5, but they didn't. Interestingly, this is the first Discovery to be called the Discovery in the US. Previous models were just called the LR3 and LR4. When the Discovery first came out in 1989, it was designed to be a slightly more luxurious Defender, as the original Range Rover was, but that was becoming increasingly more upmarket, so they needed something to fill the gap. You know, something that a farmer could use on his farm, but then also take it out on the weekend. Well, this all-new Discovery isn't just a slightly more luxurious Defender. No, this could give a Range Rover a run for its money. The model I'm in today I borrowed from a friend of mine, Alex at AMD Automotive, so I'll leave a link below to his website. Anyway, this model is the top spec luxury HSE model, and it has the 306 horsepower SDV6. This has things like a heated steering wheel, deployable side steps, and 7 seats which you can fold down at the touch of a button. I just can't see many farmers shelling out nearly £80,000, which is what this cost when it was new, and then using it as a workhorse. This is the Chelseaest of tractors. Styling wise, this car really divides opinions. There are lots of people out there who don't like it. People don't like the off-centre rear number plate or the way the roof steps up, but I do. I think it's a very clever nod to the past, while dragging the Discovery into the 21st century. The thing that does take some getting used to though is the size of it. It's a big car, this, especially for these narrow UK roads. But overall, I think it's quite good looking. It's instantly recognisable. If I'm being really critical, the rear overhang is a little bit ungainly, but that does translate to lots of interior space. It's a genuine 7-seater, this car. And when I say 7-seater, I mean 7 seats big enough for adults. There's plenty of headroom, plenty of legroom in all 7 seats. And all the doors open out very wide, so access is excellent. I'd be very happy to have one sitting on my driveway, especially in Carpathian grey with all the black bits. I think it looks good. I mean, it's not as boxy or as conservative as the Discovery 4, but I still think it's a good looking car. I've been driving this now for a few hours and I can tell you straight away that it doesn't feel like a Discovery. It feels like a Range Rover. It's much more upmarket than the previous model. What Land Rover have done with this car is make it a genuine rival to the Mercedes GLS, the BMW X7, the Audi Q7. I think they've pulled it off. And unlike all of its German rivals, this is genuinely capable off-road. It's a bit of a jack of all trades, this. This new Discovery is one of the most capable off-roaders Land Rover have ever made. It has a wade-in depth of 900mm, and an all-new version of its clever terrain response system. This thing will get you anywhere. It's much lighter than the previous model, and I don't mean 50 kilos or 100 kilos, I'm talking 480 kilos lighter than the outgoing model. And that's all thanks to its sophisticated aluminium body and chassis. If this thing were a person, it would be releasing a fitness DVD. Because it's far lighter than the 4, it means it's much more efficient, and it goes around corners better. As you're driving along, it feels as though you're in a Range Rover. It feels luxurious. Opulent almost. The ride's quite soft and it does feel a little bit top heavy, but it's nowhere near as wallowy as a full-size Range Rover. And it's nowhere near as harsh as a Range Rover Sport. I would say as far as ride and handling go, this has got to be the best in Land Rover's lineup, or the best for the real world anyway. This model has adjustable air suspension, but coil springs are standard on base models. So if you want one less thing to go wrong, perhaps go with the coil springs. Under the bonnet of this one is a 3-litre turbo diesel V6. This is the quicker SDV6, which produces 306 horsepower. You could also go for a 3-litre supercharged petrol, and there are a couple of 4-cylinders to choose from, either a 2-litre Ingenium diesel or a 2-litre Ingenium petrol. Now the figures on the 2-litre diesel do look genuinely impressive. They've managed to get 240 horsepower from it, but I just can't imagine that engine being particularly reliable when it gets to 100,000 miles. I think you're just asking too much from a small engine. It'd be a bit like trying to move the Titanic with the engine from a jet ski. So if it were my own money I was spending, I would go for the SDV6. This one will do 0 to 60 in around 7.5 seconds and keep going till it reaches 130 miles an hour. Now, it never feels quick, but equally, it never feels slow either. You put your foot down and there is plenty of power. They all use an 8-speed automatic gearbox, you can't buy a manual, and it does a pretty good job. Kickdowns are quick and immediate, and the gear changes are fairly seamless. Fuel-wise, I've done a variety of driving this morning and I've averaged 30 miles per gallon.
It's also more eco-friendly than the outgoing model. This one only puts out 202 grams of CO2 per kilometre, which makes it ULEZ friendly. On a steady motorway run, there's no reason why you shouldn't see 38 miles per gallon from this. Moving inside the new Discovery, I think the interior is great. It's stylish, modern, but also very functional. It's all very upmarket. I mean, it's worlds away from the original Discovery with its sickly pale blue interior. Remember that removable bag that they had in the centre console? I genuinely don't know what they were thinking of. Anyway, it's tons better. It really feels like a car fit for 2021. You could spend a lot of time in this car and never tire of it. The seats are very comfortable and supportive. The steering wheel feels nice to use. The infotainment system's very user-friendly and the display's very crisp. I love the secret drawer you get. It's a bit sad how excited I get over a secret compartment, but I don't know, maybe it's a man thing. All of the buttons and switches feel almost as good as a full-size Range Rover. When I say almost, I mean there are certain areas, like the rubber they've used around the rotary gear selector. It doesn't feel as upmarket as a full-size Vogue. In this, they've made it feel a little bit more utilitarian. Things like the lower parts of the door cards are a little bit plasticky, but they've done that on purpose so that if you get them splattered in mud, you can easily wipe it off. So yeah, overall it isn't quite as luxurious as a full-size Range Rover, but very close. I love the digital dash and the fact that you can customise it. I like the fact that the map stays in the centre, a bit like all new Audis. This being the luxury HSE model has absolutely everything. The reverse camera is crystal clear, the Meridian sound system's excellent. It really does have a lot going for it. There's also plenty of storage compartments. You get 2 big cup holders there, a very deep centre console storage, and lots of storage in the door cards. The driving position, as you might expect, is excellent. It's very commanding. You sit up high over almost every other car on the road. Visibility is excellent because you've got these big slab-sided windows. What's funny is you forget just how big this car is until you turn around and realise that the back window is about 1.5 miles behind you. Thankfully, it's got front and rear parking sensors and cameras, so it'd be quite difficult to get into difficulty with this. Being that it's a Land Rover, I think we've got to talk about reliability. Now, Land Rover have been trying to improve the reliability over the last few years, so time will tell on that front. But so far as my own personal experience goes, you might have things like one of the deployable side steps might not open, or one of the roof blinds might not close. But they're just niggly things that I think you can live with. My own experience tells me that they're no less reliable than any of the German rivals. I've certainly never been stranded by mine, touch wood. So I wouldn't let other people's preconceived ideas about reliability put you off buying one of these. Used prices here in the UK start at around £30,000, but that's going to get you a high mileage, low spec example. For a low mileage, high spec example like this, expect to spend just over 50. Now I know that's a hell of a lot of money for a Discovery, but you can't look at this as a Discovery because it's a genuine rival to the Mercedes GLS, Audi Q7, BMW X7. It's a 7-seat Range Rover basically. When you think of it like that, you can just about justify it. I think this has a lot more charm than the German rivals. You can safely buy one of these and not come across as a flash Harry. If I wanted a large 7-seat SUV, then I would certainly consider a new Discovery. I mean, the X7's hideous. I've never been a big fan of the Q7, and the Mercedes GLS just makes you look like a rich housewife from Weybridge. So I think that pretty much sums up the new Land Rover Discovery. It's a great car, perhaps a little bit too big for UK roads, and it's a little bit on the pricey side, but genuinely capable both on and off-road, and certainly, without doubt, the best Discovery Land Rover I've ever made.
Well, that was the Discovery 5, a seriously capable, luxurious four-wheel drive. But as you can see from these videos, and you can see how it's evolved, it has kind of lost its identity. It's certainly no longer the farmer's family car as it once was. In fact, you're more likely to see one of these Discovery 5s parked outside a farm shop than an actual working farm. To give you a brief recap then, I think my pick of the bunch would be the Discovery 4. Preferably something like a 2012 onwards. I think as good as the Discovery 3s were, they're just getting on a bit in age, and I think you might be asking for trouble. So go with something like a Discovery 4, with good service history, get the cam belt done, service the gearbox, and you should be alright. Well, I think that's about it for the Land Rover Discovery. If you've got a car that you'd like to see featured in one of these videos, then let me know in the comments below. But until next time, thank you once again for watching. Make sure you give the video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Make sure you subscribe if you haven't done already. You can follow me on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. I'll leave the links below. And yeah, cheers guys. See you next time.